Before maintenance and servicing, the operators must have read and understood the manual, paying special attention to the chapter Safety Precautions. Non-observance of the above means a threat to life and limb. The separator works reliably, provided that it's operated and maintained in accordance with the operating instructions. Attention! Do not loosen any part of the separator before the bowl has come to a standstill. Use only genuine spare parts from Westfalia separator. Undo the oil drain screw and drain the 2.5 litres of oil into the oil pan. Undo the hex head screws on the brake housing. Remove the brake with brake housing. Unscrew the hex head screws on the motor. Pull the motor out of the flange guide by means of the hoist. The drive belt becomes slack. Pull the drive belt off the belt pulley, centrifugal clutch, downwards. Lift the motor with centrifugal clutch out of the lower section of the frame. Unscrew the union and remove the operating water connection in the upper section of the frame. Unscrew the hex head screws of the operating feeding system. Take the operating water feeding system out of the upper section of the frame. Take the drive belt out of the lower section of frame. Take the gasket out of the lower section of the frame. Unscrew the hex head screws on the bearing housing. Remove the spindle assembly with vibration absorber out of the lower section of the frame. Only when replacing the cup springs. Unscrew the hex head screws from the bearing cover and remove the bearing cover with sealed-in hex head screws, disc and cup springs from the lower frame section. Take out the gasket. Pull off the bearing bush together with angular contact ball bearing with the aid of a commercially available pulling device. Then, pull off the angular contact ball bearing and the ball bearing protection ring. Use pliers to remove the retaining ring. Use a commercially available pulling device to pull the angular contact ball bearings and the bearing cover off the spindle. Drive the angular contact ball bearing out of the bearing bush with the aid of a mandrel. Heat the grooved ball bearing in oil to 80 degrees centigrade. Mount the bearing cover. Slide the grooved ball bearing onto the spindle and make sure it is correctly seated. Fit the retaining ring in the spindle groove. Heat the ball bearing protection ring and angular contact ball bearings in oil to 80 degrees centigrade. Place the ball bearing protection ring on the spindle. When fitting the angular contact ball bearings on the spindle, make sure that the narrow rim of each ball bearing inner ring faces upwards. Bearing damage is caused by incorrect fitting. Then let the bearings cool down. Heat the bearing bush in oil to 80 degrees centigrade and then slide it over the angular contact ball bearings and the ball bearing protection ring. Insert the gasket in the groove in the lower section of the frame. Only necessary when replacing the cup springs. Place the cup springs on the hex head screw. Pay attention to correct positioning. Bolt tight the bearing cover with sealed-in hex head screws and disc with hex head screws. Clean the guide and supporting surfaces in the lower section of the frame. Fit the vibration absorber. Attention, the hole must be directed upwards. Grease the groove in the lower section of the frame and fit the gasket. Install the assembled spindle in the lower section of the frame. Pay attention to correct positioning. Bolt tight the spindle with the 3 hex head screws. Insert and grease the gasket in the groove in the lower section of the frame. Arrest the clutch driver with the wrench. Unscrew the hex head screw from the motor shaft end. Screw the Allen screw in the motor shaft end. Screw the eye bolt into the clutch driver. Arrest the clutch driver with the wrench. Force the centrifugal clutch off the motor shaft end by turning the eye bolt clockwise. Unscrew the Allen screw from the motor shaft end. Take the retaining ring out of the clutch driver groove. Take out the disc. Pull the clutch shoes out of the clutch driver. Take out the retaining ring. Place the clutch drum on a wooden base. Place on a hard PVC mandrel and lightly hammer the clutch driver downwards. Take the retaining ring out of the clutch drum groove. Place the clutch drum on a wooden support. Drive the grooved ball bearings and the distance bush out of the clutch drum. Clean the clutch drum. Insert the retaining ring in the lower groove. Ensure that the retaining ring is correctly fitted. Carefully drive the grooved ball bearing with a suitable pipe up to the retaining ring. The pipe may only lie on the outer ring of the grooved ball bearing. Position the distance bush on the ball bearing inner ring. Carefully drive the groove ball bearing with a suitable pipe up to the distance bush. The pipe may only lie on the outer ring of the grooved ball bearing. Insert retaining ring 180 degrees offset relative to the retaining ring in the upper groove. Danger of imbalance. Turn clutch drum with fitted grooved ball bearings through 180 degrees. Place the ball bearing inner ring on the ring. The distance bush must be flush with the inner rings of the two grooved ball bearings. Carefully hammer the clutch driver into the grooved ball bearing with light blows using a rubber mallet. Turn the clutch drum through 180 degrees, then fit the retaining ring in the groove of the clutch driver. Fit the assembled centrifugal clutch on the motor shaft end. Pay attention to the feather key groove. Arrest the clutch driver with the wrench. Pull the centrifugal clutch onto the motor shaft end by turning the hex head screw. Screw the hex head screw into the motor shaft end and firmly tighten. Fit the clutch shoes. Make sure that the clutch shoes are evenly spaced. Insert the disc. Then fit the retaining ring in the groove of the clutch driver. Carefully place the motor with pre-assembled centrifugal clutch on the lower section of the frame by means of a hoist. Do not yet let the motor flange lock into the frame opening. Remove the grease from the belt running surfaces of the spindle and clutch drum. Mount the drive belt through the opening in the upper section of the frame and through the brake housing opening, centrifugal clutch. Screw the metric 10 by 120 hex head screw with hexagon nut and washer through the frame bore into the tap hole of the centrifugal clutch. To avoid damage to the groove ball bearing, do not screw in the hex head screw completely. Tension the drive belt by turning the hexagon nut clockwise until the motor flange locks into the frame opening. Bolt tight the motor with 4 metric 12 by 30 hex head screws. Unscrew the hex head screw with hexagon nut and washer from the centrifugal clutch. Screw the threaded plug into the lower section of the frame. Check that the spindle can be turned easily. Fit the operating water feed system and bolt tight with 4 metric 8 by 12 hex head screws. Fit the operating water connection in the upper section of the frame. Screw in the joint with the pipe. Fit the brake and brake housing to the lower section of the frame with 3 metric 8x20 hex head screws. Attention! Check that the brake has been released. Prior to commissioning the separator, fill the drive chamber with oil up to maximum in the middle of the sight glass. The filling amount is approximately 2.5 litres. During operation, the oil level must never drop below the middle of the sight glass. Be sure to top up oil in good time. The bowl height must not be adjusted on this separator. The bowl height may only be measured with fitted drive belt. The control dimension has a tolerance of 27 plus or minus 2 mm between the upper edge of the bowl lock ring and the upper section of the frame. Before restarting the separator, be sure to refer to the instructions in the chapter Before Startup in the instruction manual.